Hi, I'm Ralph Dinsley, known as Dins. I'm the Executive Director and Founder of Northern Spaces Security, and I listen to the Cold Star Project.
This show is for entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be what is termed professional advice. The Cold Star Project is proudly presented by the Operational Excellence Society. Cold Star Tech is a supporter of the OPEX Society, and Jason Canigan is a member of its board of advisors. Talk with us at Cold Star Tech to find out more about the OPEX Society and what we can achieve together in your organization, or just visit opexsociety.org. Thanks for joining us for today's show. Welcome back to the Cold Star Project, and we're returning with Dr. Yan Song, a highly appreciated cultural expert and a senior executive at a major Fortune 500 firm. So, Dr. Song, as he's so fond of reminding us, is a scientist, and he has that rationalist point of view. And so it is really fun to go through what we are looking at in this series, which is how to operationalize cultural development. And this means heading towards operational excellence, getting your people to think for themselves and create for themselves, co-create, and the results are just incredible. And this is hard work, perhaps the hardest work. I mentioned in here in our discussion today, and probably before, that I've been studying this stuff for years, and I am well behind Dr. Song. It is a real pleasure for me to talk about these questions and issues and this subject with him, because it's an incredible learning opportunity. So listen up. We're going to get into step 4, which is transform the culture, and then if you have questions about this, please email me, jason@goldstartech.com, or message me on LinkedIn. And we're looking at doing a follow-up episode Q&A. So, Dr. Song, welcome. And I got to say, the upcoming slides are complicated. They don't just look complicated, they are complicated. And Yan and I were just talking about this before the episode. I am going to let him take us through the material as a jungle guide. This is step 4. And really encourage you to take notes, write down your questions, and please send them to me. Message me on LinkedIn with them, email me at jason@goldstartech.com. Yan and I are thinking about doing, if there's enough interest, a follow-up episode. I know even more, right? But where we answer your questions, and at least if you write them down, then we have a chance to look at them and answer them. But also, if you're free sometime during the day, let me know, and maybe you can come on Zoom with us. I'll repeat this offer again at the end, hopefully, if I remember. And you can ask your question live and get your answer from Yan live, and maybe I'll be able to chirp in with a little bit of data there. Speaking of which, I need to let you share screens, which I have now. So let's get into it. Thanks for being here again. I know this is like, folks, we could be paying Yam $500 an hour for this information, and he'd already have made a couple $1,000, and it'd be worth it, you know. Nobody's studying, very few people are studying cultural development the way that Dr. Song is. And I look around out there, you know, I got 2 courses up on the other screen here about systems thinking that I got to go through. I want to go through, and I have a lot to learn, right? And I'm, you know, Yan's off the chart here, and I'm at the bottom of the understanding. So let's get into this. We've gone through the first 3 stages of operationalizing cultural development, which is a really cool concept of how can we get an improvement of culture built right into the day-to-day activities of our people with the goal of achieving operational excellence. And today, you know, we've moved into the new territory. We've kind of assessed the situation, seen all that bubbling lava coming out, you know, goopy stuff coming out of the salt mine there, or whatever that crystal thing. And there's an image that'll stick with me, even if I can't remember exactly the name of what it's called, but I could picture it. And now that we're moving into the new territory, bravely, knowing that, hey, it's not easy. There's going to be frustrations and feelings, you know, and we got to figure this stuff out. What do we do next? What is step 4?
Yeah, so thanks, Jason. It's been delightful to have this conversation with you, right? So today we are supposed to be finishing up step 4, right? The final step. But as you probably already see this, right? This is really the beginning of a journey, right? So this is the final step, but also it's the first step of the journey. So what I'm trying to do in this final step, quote, quote, final step, is to show you the whole picture, right? So far, we've been trying to take our audience one step at a time, right? So let's get into it. So since this is supposed to be our last session, so I want to take a little bit even deeper dive to show you the whole journey, see how all those different pieces working together. So just to set the right expectation, there no one, knows this, from the start, right? So don't feel like, somehow depressed
Right.
that you can't do this all the thing. Nobody could do this. I couldn't do this 15 years ago. So I made my share of mistakes and blunders and scars, right? So so the purpose I'm doing this is try to share my experiences and learning so that you may have a easier time. It's not going to be easy, but as we said in previous sessions, instead of taking 15 years, maybe this could take 15 months for you, right? That would be a huge order of magnitude improvement from what my experience has been. So that's the context, I would say, the mindset you should have when you listen to this and look at the material, right? Yes, yeah. At outset, you will feel overwhelmed, like we all feel about life at a certain point, right? So that's sort of why I want to premise this session on that. Okay, so let me share. So I want to start with this particular slide that we showed last session, right? So, I just quickly run through this, right, in terms of the development stages that Professor Bob Keegan has laid out, right? And there's a particular detail I didn't go into, but I want to point this out to you as sort of the prelude of what we're going to talk today. Did you notice those development stages is not a straight line, right? It is kind of like a stages, right? Curves. So, and there is reason this because development is not a straight line. It's not a quote unquote higher and the better thing. That's a myth. It very much depends on the environment, the life conditions you are in, and you developed as you grow up. And typically, you will be stalled at a particular stage and stay there until things accumulate and life becomes so painful, unbearable. Then you start another climb, right? So nobody is, say, oh, today, I just got a chunk of spare time. Let me climb that curve. Nobody does that. If you have spare time, you go play golf. Okay, you do whatever your favorite thing. Cooking. You don't do human development. You don't do cultural development. Cultural development only happens. This is another insight from Professor Bob Keegan, right? Through what he called optimal conflict. Yeah. So let me move this picture away a little bit so that you can see the words here.
They can see it.
It's on the next slide.
Yeah.
So never mind. So it is hard, right? So people don't do development because they find it attractive and sexy. No, that's not what happens. People do development when they are forced to, because this thing is so difficult. Whether they are doing difficult job, right, they couldn't get it done, or they're dealing with some really challenging relationships, right? The marriage is breaking up, whatever. So that kind of what Bob Keegan called optimal conflict. That means it's kind of life death type of situation. That's when you develop. That's when you actually evolve to the next stages. Okay. So Jason and I just, chatted a little bit about the spiral dynamics, right? How he listened to lectures over months, those things. That's better than just reading a book and say, I got it now, right? But still, that's just still listening.
Yeah.
So that's still not true development. You don't develop like that until you get to this life death situation and struggle with it. So for listeners out there, right, the material I'm going to tell you, you need to take it in that context, right? So don't expect you will absorb it all and know it all, right? So this, once again, what I want to do is show you the sort of the landscape of the whole journey. And then it's up to you, right? When and how, if you take the journey. So that's the premise I wanted to throw.
Okay. And people should be watching or listening to this again. There is kind of a spiral knowledge or understanding. You come up and you run into the same idea again. I listen to my own sales training every 6 months or a year. I go back and listen to my own sales training programs that I made in like 2013 to start with, right? Yeah. Because I need ongoing reinforcement. I forget techniques. I don't use them. I forget them, right? And then I listen to it again and I'm like, oh yeah, right. And then I can go out and use it. So same thing here. I want you to come back 3 months, 6 months from now and listen to this again.
And talk to your, co-conspirators, I call it, right? So this stuff is not what you talk about at Thanksgiving time with your family, Right. So it's just too thick, too heavy, or too painful to talk about, right? Like I said, if you have free time, play golf, having nice dinner, this is not what you would do at those times. Okay, having said that, though, where I want to say is that the reason that we're doing this at all is because I see signs that, we as a people here in United States, and really as a species, is in what I would call the eye of a perfect storm. You see, as I just mentioned before, you don't do this kind of a development, right? Go to the next stage until you're desperate. And I think as a culture as a whole, we are close to that situation of desperation. And I'll explain to you why I think that way. So that is one of the motivations for me to actually, be interested in doing this type of sessions, right? Because I think we need this as a people in order to move forward as a species versus, sort of start bickering and sort of, going internal and almost like having a divorce within ourselves. And I see a lot of signs that's actually start happening more and more. And usually, and since I'm a scientist, that's simply nature's way telling us, saying, hey, kiddo, you need to move up a stage, right? What you have here is too stagnant. And that's why you still start saying infighting, all those things. There's no real solution to those infighting. There's no amount of justice to do that, to resolve that. You have to move on to the next plateau, right? So Albert Einstein famously said, right? You can never solve the problem at the same level of thinking which created the problem in the first place. And I think we are very close to that stage. And by the way, this has happened several times in history, which is part of the material I'm showing you today, right? We can learn from those history. So at a certain point, we just have to tell ourselves, look, guys, we need to pick up our things and move on instead of fighting to hold on to those things that we, historical that is, has helped us. So I think we are very close to that stage. Okay, so
there it is.
I'm going to bring up this Mammoth, image again, right? So we started with this image. I very much a very rich image. So this is why I like this, right? So if you look at the world stage today, right? What do we say? Globally, nationally, I don't think anybody dispute that we have a serious political polarization in this country and worldwide, okay? And there's a big surge of populism, authoritarianism. And there's no question, both in this country and globally, right? And we hear this, watch this on TV every day. There's the economic inequality is worsening, right? And there's just horrific scientific illiteracy. I mean, imagine, people deal with COVID-19 the way that, people back in the Middle Ages, deal with pandemics. And this is after, 200-300 years of scientific progress. We're regressing here. There's no question. So those are signs to me that we have reached a point where we really needed to refresh ourselves versus just try to, reinforce the moral code or whatever we have today and hope to solve that problem. Because like I said, if you learn from history and, from wisdom like Albert Einstein, those things, those are just signs that nature is telling us, hey, kiddo, move on. Yeah. So, and you look inside organizations, right? Operational, since we talk about operational excellence here, there's widespread employee disengagement, and there's, Gallup surveys, there's certainly more than half employees are disengaged in majority of companies. So their mind is went somewhere else. And we mentioned this, observation in positive psychology called learned helplessness. It's just pandemic. I once led a program, try to revamp a customer relationship management situation for our organization, right? So I went there, spent 6 months with, group of managers, directors, and those people, I would say 90% of them just totally give up hope. And that's a symptom of learned helplessness. Yeah, everything you tell me, I've tried before. It didn't work. So there's a serious challenge there. And talent drains. We simply don't have, enough talents who are capable of scaling this level of challenges, right? That's why you get so many people who feel helplessness. Why? They simply are not well equipped enough to deal with it. And where do you find this talent? I mean, it's very, very difficult. So we have a talent drain. And increasingly, how we deal with it, I mean, people deal with it with measures, like I said, reinforcing what has worked in the past, which borderline on the political correctness. Okay, so, and I'm not saying that is entirely nonsense, but as a whole, it's just inadequate to deal with the challenges that we're facing, right? Look at left again, the image I put out, right? If you are lying at the foot of this mountain of lava, okay, and you're so far away from the mouth, the source of life, no amount of a demolition, right, reconstruction at the foot will ever get you to the source of life. So we need to do something different. That's my point. And interestingly, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. actually put his finger on the source of a problem more than 40 years ago. So this is from the last book he wrote. I think it's titled something like "Where Do We Go Now?" Yeah. So at after all the civil rights movement, all the things that Dr. King has done, at that point, I think this was like a couple of years before he was assassinated, right? He was wondering aloud in his own mind, where do we go now? So this is what I'm saying, right? If people think we can solve our problem by political correctness, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't think so. So, I put a quote here. I think he put his finger on the key of the problem, even though, he didn't live long enough to formulate the solution.
Right. And let's read it aloud because we have some listeners who don't watch the video.
Yeah. So why don't you read it?
It says, power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. It is precisely this collision of immoral power and powerless morality which constitutes the major crisis of our time. And that, King was assassinated in 1968, so this is the middle 60s that he put this out.
Yeah. So what that evoke from you, Jason? Let me ask you.
Well, we have to have good leaders, right? And number one, do your best to find good leaders, but they're going to be rare. And average people are average, right? Half of people are below average at whatever they do, as a friend of mine consistently says. The other thing that I've seen too is that when you up level, problems don't get solved; they dissolve. They kind of just disappear. That is something that we might see here. If you're broke and struggling, every little fee and renewable service charge or something like that is potentially a disaster. And then you get hit with more service fees or something like that for being bad, in the banking industry's eyes. And then, maybe somebody comes along and pays you a good chunk of money, and suddenly you just pay those little debts and problems in that, right? And the problem dissolves. So I'm curious to see how that will appear in this format.
Yeah. So, Albert Einstein put it more elegantly,
Sure.
naturally, Jason is not quite Einstein yet. So he basically said 80% of the problem, right, we have is how to define the problem. So if you define the problem properly, you've solved 80% already. So that's simply another way of saying what you just said, Jason, right? Problems just dissolve by themselves if you see the problem from the right context. Okay.
If you're worrying about all these little fees and surcharges and things like that, rather than how do I get the right level of revenue to make that go away, right? What's your eye on? The same thing is happening. The same behavior or results or whatever are happening, right? Or biological, activities are happening, but your eye is on a different thing.
Yeah. And from this image we have on the screen, right? So if you're hoping to hack your way to the mouth of spring, right, by removing all those things before you can take a next step, you'll be doing that forever. So it's better to pick up your gears and move on. A lot of times it's like that. So once you see the problem from a new height, a new angle, that problem sometimes doesn't exist at all. So why should you bother with that boulder, right? When you can get to the source of life without demolishing it. What's the point of spending all your energy demolishing that boulder? So keep that in mind as we move on. So what this, Dr. King's insight invoked to me is that, you know what, instead of waiting for another leader like a Dr. King, which would be wonderful, I think we should also try to find those qualities, leadership, or whatever you call it, in ourselves, right? So what I'm going to tell you is, from a scientific perspective, I believe we all have it. We all have in ourselves, to a larger or smaller degree, and we can all start mining this gold, I call it. Yeah, miracle can happen. I believe it can happen. And anyway, what do we have to lose? Right. Instead of go with the wind, let's take a shot at it. So that's my attitude. All right. So what I'm going to show you is really a tool that you can mine this gold in yourself and in others. So once again, I call this ecology of power and love. That means it's a science. The science doesn't know it's Jason or it's Yan, it's male, female, it's a Chinese, it's American, it's it's Englishman. It doesn't care. Okay, so if you're a human being, you should be able to leverage this tool to mine the gold for yourself. Meaning, you should be able to diagnose and heal, right? Bring your power and love closer to alignment. You see, a lion's share of our problems, especially our most serious problem, is just as Dr. King said, it's because power and love became alienated. So a lot of time people focus on only one, right? I just want more love. Or they say, I want more power. But until the two bring together, that's the source of problem. Sometimes by asking for more power or more love, you actually exacerbate the problem. And I look at a lot of things that's going on today. It's that tendency. So what I'm trying to do here is to show you what I call the ecology of power love, meaning how power love together, how do we live together? It's not a one-time and done thing. It's not a one-off thing, right? It's got a life of its own. It's got the integrity of its own. So you've got to take care of that. It's like a marriage, okay? You've got to take care of that, whichever stage of marriage you are in. Otherwise, you don't have a marriage, and then you'll be miserable. So let's see how this works. Okay. So it's going to sound a little bit like a creation story. Okay. Because we are talking about creativity and creation here. Okay. There's no question. And probably at a pretty high level, meaning critical level of creativity. So we said, right, we spent the previous, sessions, we dialogue about mental models, right? And how critical this mental model is. And there's some basic values, there's some basic assumptions, right? So here I'm just reformulate a little bit, okay, in order to crystallize, what's the absolute essence of this, right? So this, by the way, this is what science is, right? It try to crystallize things like you think about Newton's law, right? There's a lot of phenomena, there's a lot of things going on, but how could you minimize it so that you can put your hands on it, right? Because it's difficult to put your hands on 10,000 things. So it's better 10, better still 2. So this is my way of crystallizing this to a minimal form so that it can become a science and become manageable, right? So my representation of the mental model is power and love. Okay. So as we get into the content of this, you will get a better feel for this. So don't worry, just stay with me here. And as we said, right, this model has real consequences. So we design our actions in order to operate the way that our mental model mandates us. And it has direct impact on results, outcomes, right? If you're in business, this is you're talking about operational results, operational outcome here. Okay. And we also said, right, remember Bob Keegan's curve, right? There's distinct set of mental models and behaviors and operating outcomes that you can achieve, right? So there's distinct patterns. Here, I call it consciousness, order of consciousness, right? So it simply means, because mental model is the thing that we have in our heads, right? What is that? That's consciousness. And these are not just random thought. It actually has integrity to it. There's a structure. It's operating. So there's order. There's organizing principles dictating which mental model you have. And we're going to talk about where does that come from? Where is that going? Right? That simply give you a way of navigating through this, whether for yourself, for your team, right? For your organization, for the human race as a whole. It's the same. This is what science is. Okay? So now let me unfold the story for you. It's going to sound a little like a creation story, okay? So don't get freaked out about it. So this is still science. So I'll say, like, we say, at the beginning, God created human beings. Guess what? We have, right from the time we were born, we have a strong survival instinct, right? We kick and screaming if we're hungry and, diaper need to be changed or whatever discomfort we have, right? So at that moment, if we're conscious at all, what is our deepest desire? Our desire is to survive, right? This is deeply wired in us. So, if you're an infant, just newborn, you may not be conscious of this, but nature already wired this in you. Otherwise, you would never have a chance to survive. And later on, even when you gain some consciousness, you're not out of this. You still try to survive. And what is the tool you have to survive? It's instinct, right? If I feel cold, I need to do something that to keep me warm. If I'm hungry, I'm in the scream so my mother could feed me. Whatever that instinct you have, and this is not just infant. Adults, you see this all the time, right? Whenever people act with impulses, they are really acting out of this set of mental model, operating system, right? They are reacting moment by moment for what? To survive, right? To do whatever they think is more advantageous to them. So you see this behavior all the time. And there's serious consequences, right? You get the result from this. And anyone think that this is not a serious business, you try to go on vacation and leave the two teenagers at home for 2 or 3 weeks and see what you find when you come back. Or if you're a business owner, take hiatus, before you build your organization so that there's a higher level of consciousness to actually operating, and just take it off and see what you will find when you come back in 2 to 3 weeks. There's serious consequences. Okay, so anthropologists, right, have studied this phenomena, and for tens of thousands of years, right, until really, before agriculture became widespread. Yeah, human beings lived pretty much in this state of consciousness, hand to mouth, I call it, right? So they cannot worry about what is my 401k, right, when I retire. What they worry is about next meal and most next day. That's the sort of the horizon they look at it, and they had to. So this is not about, looking at this and look down at them, right? Just like we don't look down at our own children when they were young. We should not look down to our ancestors who lived this tremendously hard life in order actually to sustain the bloodline of life, and so that you and I can talk about this today. So this is not about looking down. This is about recognizing where we came from and what we still are even today. Because if we ignore this reality, then we enter into political correctness, I call it. And then we will not solve the problem. We only make the problem worse. Okay, so that's the first operating system I wanted to start with, right? So there's no denying here, folks. We all start from here. Unless you were born with full head of hair, full intelligence. I know I wasn't born like that. Okay, so I start from here. Okay, we all start from here, but we don't stay here, right? So that's what Albert Einstein called miraculous, right? Something happened that we moved on. And the first thing that happened is that people started wanting security beyond the day-to-day, hour-by-hour survival, right? I want some assurance that I'm going to have enough food to eat next day, next week, next month, next year, for the rest of my life, right? Nowadays, I want the 401k so that I can live a comfortable life after I retire. That's security. That's fundamentally different from day-to-day survival. And who would argue that security is not desirable? So that's why it represents next level of our love, I call it, right? This is something we deeply desire. And how do we achieve that? Through better organization. And if you look at how not just humans, but animal kingdom, right? How they evolved from this kind of a day-to-day affair. They develop very elaborate social hierarchies, right? Authority in order to basically organize themselves better, right?
Yeah, birds
Because
have flocks. Right?
yeah,
Wolves
exactly.
have the pack. Right.
When you operate in that archaic, level of consciousness, you're doing things quite frantically, and there's a lot of waste there, especially collectively as a whole, right? Even individually, sometimes we change our mind moment for moment, and we sort of destroy what we just done, and that happens. You observe even in employees today. So when people get frantic, right, get into this kind of a survival mode, they start making more mistakes, not less. So the way you help, whether it's yourself or others, your team, your organization, get out of that is by establishing proper authority. What the authority do is it enforces accountability. You see, that accountability delivers order of magnitude better results, as we all know. Otherwise, if you are a business owner, you have no business to be a business owner. Okay, so the reason you can become a business owner is because you have the potential to create that much more value by providing organization to an otherwise archaic situation. So if you're a business owner, you should be proud, but you should also know why you exist. It's not because of your big ego. It's because you provide this social and really natural service to the human race. That's how we evolve next to our next ecosystem, or what do you call it? I call it traditional consciousness. And humanity spent tens of thousands of years in the first archaic, then spent 1,000 years in this traditional consciousness. And don't think we are over that. Not at all. We're still living this. If you are in any kind of organizational setting, if you're a business owner, the chances are you're using this second level to organize your business so that you can deliver the value that justify your existence. If you're not doing this, you have no business to be a business owner, like I said. So I think today there's a lot of perceptions and talk about against authority, right? Against hierarchy, against any kind of basically, nobody can tell me what to do. Otherwise, you are intruding on my freedom. I think that's misguided. We need to understand where we came from, why our ancestors did what they did. And instead of just feel resentment, we really needed to understand the context that this came from. And especially, we're not out of it, not by a long shot. So when we start throwing our weight against authority blindly, what do? We throw ourselves, our organizations, and our country back to the archaic stage of life. You see, for some reason, our US government never learned this. we keep invading third world countries and throw out barbaric dictators and hope some enlightenment would happen. That's just ignorant.
The Enlightenment is they come back to the traditional thought form eventually.
Yeah, what you do there is chaos, because nobody can grow. The next stage of consciousness will go to very soon, right? Overnight.
Yeah,
That's just inhuman. That's inhuman to expect anyone to be able to accomplish that.
Right. Yeah, if you blow up their power plants, blow up their power plants and you blow up their water treatment plants, you're back to bare survival, right?
Yeah.
You got a guy living in a cave again, trying to do all the work, gather the wood to burn the fire, feed himself, right? And that's very difficult. Contrast with a modern society in this traditional consciousness order here, I guess, where you've got central heating, powered by municipal or state power plants. And we're used to that. We just take that for granted. And in order to do that, we must submit to the authority of the state, right?
Yeah.
Which says we're going to collectively operate this particular power source, and you're going to enjoy the security of having a nice apartment building to come home to that is heated. Whenever I get too big for my britches, I remember this example of one of the kings of France, and I think it was like in the 1800s, late 1700s, maybe right before the revolution, or maybe after, when there was a restoration for a bit. I think like he had one of the Louis. He had a glass of wine in his garden freeze on him, and here he is, the king of one of the most powerful nations in the world, and he can't control the temperature of one item near him, right? And that's a thing that we have full control over today. We could just go inside, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't have that option.
And that kind of thing, right, only come from further cultural development, right? That's the fruit of next stage of cultural development. You cannot put, I call it, cart in front of the horse, right?
Right. Yeah.
So this is saying, if a country has not reached that level of cultural development, you simply cannot destroy what they have now and demanding they do better. That is inhumane. And I say this out of love for this country because I benefit from this, right? So I truly appreciate the quality of life this country has, and I want my children to have this, right? I want all of my fellow human beings to have that. But we cannot achieve this by doing things like, a bull in the china shop, right? Going there and just take out things that people have spent thousands of years building, and without a pathway for a better alternative. And that's essentially what U.S. government have done recently, right? Repeatedly in Middle East and Afghanistan, all those places. That's essentially what they have done. It's tremendously harmful to the native population and very expensive. And, not to mention loss of lives for the Americans. So why do we do that? Ignorance. If a U.S. president and all the wise men, Congress, Senate can do that, imagine what happens, right, at the lower echelons. So once again, it is human to make mistakes, but I believe it's also human that we learn from our mistakes. That's why we're doing this. Let's learn from mistakes and let's try to do better. All right. So we talked about water, right? Central heating also. Where does those come from? It actually does not come from traditional consciousness. It may have now more organized way of approaching life, right? By establishing authority, all those things. It has a plan, right, for next year's harvest and all that. Agriculture came out of that. But all the modern comfort came from the next level of consciousness. So after security, what do people want?
I was going to say to express themselves. Yeah.
That's right.
Autonomy.
So after you no longer worry about your food the next month, even for the rest of your life, what do you want? You want to be your own man or your own woman, right? So this is just as natural as water. We wanted to have a more say about our own lives, right? This is the way I like it. Rare, medium, or well done. That's autonomy. But not even the kings and queens who are living in traditional consciousness can afford this autonomy. Believe me, if you read the history, don't think that, there are bad kings, bad queens, they do things at their whim, but they wouldn't last long, believe me. The nobles, the others will kill them. So very few people in that traditional consciousness or mental model, whatever we call it, actually tasted autonomy, full autonomy. So in a way, as you were saying just minutes ago, we're enjoying a lifestyle that's way better than the king and the queens just a few hundred years ago. It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. And how do we achieve that? We achieve that through knowledge in more ways than we could count. Okay? So once again, that of autonomy knowledge combo, what it produces is efficiency, right? So even today, right, you go into organization, Jason, you get hired as a consultant going into organizations. What do you say? A lot of times, it's this traditional level of consciousness. People just doing things because that's what they were told when they first started. They never stop to think, oh, is this the best way? Has something changed, in the environment that I should adapt ourselves so that we can do things in a better way? I'm sure you will find out. That's why, you can make a living as a consultant. If people all recognize this instantaneous and adjust themselves, there's no need for you, Jason.
Not at that level. No, I'll go to
the
effective level.
Okay. So the next level of consciousness that enabled human beings to live a lifestyle with more autonomy, right, is enabled by knowledge. Just like Jason can go to company today and enable that company to operate more efficiently, right? That create a value, so Jason don't just charge money for nothing, okay? It can improve your productivity by order of magnitude. We talked about, right? The traditional consciousness already lifted human productivity by order of magnitude. And by the time you move into what I call the modern, right? A modern consciousness is really driven by knowledge. It can lift the productivity to another order of magnitude through efficiency. And it does this, remember, look at this, right? Love is always goes up. That means we expand our love, right? At the beginning, we just try to survive. Then we want more. We want security. Then after security, we want more. We want autonomy. It expands. But the power actually works through subordination, right? We need to subordinate our instinct. This feels good. I want to do this, to authority, because you know what? A lot of people have made similar mistakes through instinct. That's why this authority has been established. Their job is exactly try to constrain the instinct so that we can do something wiser. So power works through subordination. And this authority is no permanent angel either. We all know that. So in the modern era, right? What is the miracle here? We learned how to subordinate authority to our best knowledge, scientific knowledge. If you compare quote, quote, developed nations to the developing nations existing today, what's the difference? Right? There's no less authority in developing nations, I tell you. There's only bigger. But they don't prosper. Why? Because that authority was not enlightened. It was not informed by our best knowledge. And that happens even in the United States today. The companies that get ahead don't just have authority, but they have enlightened authority. They know their authority is limited. They needed to open to better knowledge, education, right? Expert advice. That's how you can build a good company in this modern economy. And you think that doesn't have power? It beat the hell out of this traditional type of consciousness, whether it's in an individual, in a team, in a company, doesn't matter. It always works.
Right. Yeah. I imagine it gives you greater predictive power, knowing what's going to happen. You could prepare better. So you're more nimble and can act faster than the authority-driven organizations. And the resources will go to the best spot.
Yes.
Application faster.
Yes.
This is off the top of my head.
So this is why I call this ecology, right? It's an entire ecosystem. It trickles down. This is what are we talking about here is really the most central organizing principles here. Power and love. And it has cascading effect. Now, we just mentioned, right? All the symptom signs point that this modern consciousness is aging, is becoming sort of inadequate to deal with the challenges, life conditions that we are living with. So I also said this is nature's way telling us, you know, kiddo, you need to move on. So what's the next love and power we desire and we need? I think it's mutuality and collaboration. And this is already happening in the best companies and in the best, you know, relationship that I have personally observed. And I think this is very exciting. I think I mentioned this to you maybe in our first session. This is saying that's going to change the face of planet Earth in the next century. I think we will see another order of magnitude increase in productivity, in the quality of life that we experience. Well, maybe not me or even you're much younger, but our children will, right? So, and this is not a sort of, you know, sort of a sharp cutoff, right? So we will experience this throughout our lifetime. And I have experience already, right? I mean, I have benefited from this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this research and development myself, because first of all, it benefited me. So, so what do we mean by mutuality, right? So, since I'm a physicist, right, I use a very analogous thing in physics called the principle of relativity. I don't know if you've heard this in your high school physics, right? But I found very few people actually understood what it means. What does the principle of relativity mean? It means, a lot of people interpret that as negative, say, oh, everything is relative now, nothing means anything now. So that simply means that's not at all what it means. What principle relativity said is that whatever natural law you discover, right, it's got to work in different frame of references, meaning it's got to work the same way for Jason or Yan, a woman or a man, someone in China or someone in Africa, the same way as it works here, people living in the United States. That's all the principle of relativity means. It basically put a demand on the character of the law, saying it can't be artificial. It can't be say, well, I say it's law because I like it. Okay, it need to work both ways, fully equally. And this mutuality is the same thing, right? It doesn't mean that everybody is the same. That's not what we're saying. But the law that the dictator love got to be equally applicable to all human beings. It cannot be saying, well, I like it this way because it's me, right? But that's not science. That's not natural law. So mutuality simply means that we believe, like Thomas Jefferson said we believe we were born equal, right? Not in the literal sense that, a baby is the same as adults, not that. But we all have the potential to, like I said, love is something we constantly expand, right? We have all the potential to expand our love. That's what mutuality means. And we can do this in a mutually equitable way. And that love is compatible with the new form of a power, right? Which is called collaboration. I think I mentioned this in previous sessions. If you go to the best company today, what is the bottleneck of creativity and productivity? It's getting their smart people working together. Simply because our economy, our science, our social dynamic has got so complex that no one person can know it all. So we rely on very, very deep specialists in different fields to create something new and better for ourselves. And that requires collaboration. And without a deep-seated belief in mutuality, in our shared potential and prosperity, you simply cannot enable that collaboration authentically. And that is becoming the cutting edge, I call it, right? Cultural development. Any company who can make more advance on this will naturally stand out. You will attract better talents because people are happier that way. And your talents will work better. And you have more breakthrough product and services That's happening. I'm not just, talking about here. That's happening. So that has impact, right? Not only efficiency, it actually become more effective, right? We mentioned at the beginning, 80% of the challenge of solving problem is to define the problem properly. And that's what effective means. It is order of magnitudes more meaningful, impactful than just looking at the efficiency, right? We had some conversation with Joseph Paris, all those things, operational excellence guys, right? Because of historical reasons, right? Operational excellence still anchored at the modern level of consciousness, I'll say, for the most part. They're looking at the efficiency. But if you want a true transformation and transformational impact, you have to get the root cause of that inefficiency, which require you ask a deeper level of questions that goes to the mental model. If you make progress there, you don't just improve efficiency, you transform it, you become more effective. So that's the next arrow, I call it. It's already happening, but I expect this will continue and become a dominant cultural paradigm in the next, I don't know, few decades, 100 years. That's going to
go ahead.
That's going to be fundamentally transform the quality of life for human beings on planet Earth.
Okay, and we're labeling this the postmodern order of consciousness.
Yes.
So I'd like to point out to our readers, viewers, listeners, the shift or the pendulum swing back and forth between individual, collective, right? It seems we're on a swing back towards the group as
well, not that way.
No.
This is applicable equally to individual and groups. There's no distinction here, and this is where I differ from spiral dynamics. I think you got that concept from spiral dynamics. I think that's actually a false narrative.
Okay, there's a book called Pendulum as well, which talks about this sort of thing.
Yeah. There's nothing here on this slides that is not applicable to both individual and groups. It applies equally.
I mean, I get a lot more out of being a collaborative expert, let's say, than I do about being a siloized knowledge hoarder whose security is based on what he knows, right? Is brought out to help with projects and comes in with a giant ego or something, right? Much better to pop in there.
Collaboration, I don't mean it's between two people. I mean the mindset, right? That's why we're talking about the mental model and consciousness here. This mental model consciousness can be in one person, in two people, in whole group, right? In whole organization. So that's why, I mean, we abstract this to the level of scientific understanding, which is simply not limited to individual groups, right? That boundary became meaningless.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean, first of all, you have to have this collaborative mindset, right? In order to be collaborate. Once you have this mindset, collaboration automatically happens.
So you could collaborate with a squirrel outside, I guess.
Yeah.
Somehow.
You will make most of the squirrel, right?
Okay. So yeah, this is what you're presenting is a slightly different take on what I've seen before. So I am interested in digging in deeper to find out more about this perspective. So so the first thing I thought when this popped up, the collaboration thing, was cross-functional work teams, right? Which is an old concept, but maybe that's just modern knowledge level thinking, right? So what does people working in an organization, what does that look like as collaboration? There's no formal groups or anything, and they just pop up and work together when it's needed and then go away and go back to being individuals when it's not?
Yeah, so in the previous session, we talked about this mutual learning mental model, right? That's actually what it is. So you need to recognize your current mental model, which is unilateral control, which is very, very dominant at the modern level, has limitations. So now you need to constantly shift your mental models. And that's not the easy thing, as we explained in previous steps, right? It takes months, years of work to do. So the question is it worth it, right? So that's why our love matters. If you love it, it matters. If you don't, it doesn't matter. So pick your choice, right? So at over all of this, I have one more thing to show you, right?
Okay.
The reason that we have observed this pattern over thousands, millennium, right, playing out is because there is something we observe in nature, that there's a certain direction of evolution going on. So once again, this is not that, oh, I don't like it, I don't want it to do it. I mean, we have no choice. This is natural selection, really. And another thing people often get tripped is that, oh, this happened a long time ago, right? No, it didn't. It's happening every second now. So I try to, work into some examples as we walk through this so that people understand this is real. This is happening every second of your life. Okay? So let's move on. So since we're talking about operational excellence, so I just provide these slides, right? So it's really already contained in the previous one, but I want to do this so that we can have a sort of almost like a walkthrough, right? So the way you asked Jason earlier, right? How do you do this day to day? You do this by recognizing symptoms of dysfunction, I call it, right? So remember that Mammoth hot spring image, right? What you're dealing with day to day mostly are those artifacts that happened long time ago. That's actually in the way for you to get ahead, for people to enjoy a better quality of life. So this is why, some people get allergic, look at the dysfunction. What? You're labeling me as dysfunctional, my team is dysfunctional. Let's face it. It's just like Mammoth hot springs. What you see at the surface, it's mostly dysfunctional. And the sooner we recognize that, the sooner we'd be better in a position to actually deal with it, right? So I just listed the level of dysfunctionality, right, based on our ecology of power and love. So the first level, we have employees or phenomena that just, don't know what they're doing, just commit random errors. I think you even had a guest in the previous, guest who are actually making money by developing SOPs, right? For websites, for people who reselling things, digitally, like try to be a mini Amazon, but have no idea how to do it. So he sell those operating procedures to them so they can do them actually more consistently. What is it? It's really try to help those resellers go from archaic to traditional, right? Doing things by the book. Don't just do at your whim, right? Whatever you feel like it. You will not make money that way. So, so that's, it sounds trivial, but that's how those mental models or consciousness actually playing out in real life. And going to the next level, this is probably where most of your work resides, right? So if you go into any organization, the operating procedures, right, their processes, the way they work typically is quite out of date. They haven't looked at it as for years. And things have changed and people in it don't recognize the change. That's why it's a good practice to have a consultant come in and do an audit, see what's going on, where things can be improved, right? So what does a consultant provide? Expertise, knowledge. That's the driver. That's the power of the modern consciousness. So what you actually help your clients to do is to evolve their consciousness from traditional to modern. That's what you do. There's major benefit to it. And you can measure it. And this last is just emerging, right? So I would be surprised that you're not yet getting a lot of work, at this level yet, simply because this is just emerging.
Yeah.
Right. So this is when there are services already, right? So organizations just struggling because turf issues, infighting, right? And they go around, do a lot of analysis, but then just discard those analysis. All specialists, all develop outside egos. They think they are the greatest expert.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to tell me, what to do, or there's better ideas. So that requires fundamentally a different type of management method and scale that needed to help people connect at a deeper level, right? So that they can recognize what mental models they are operating on. And inspired dynamics, since you're familiar with, this is about the second tier. This is second tier. This is where second tier thinking kicks in. So
well, okay. So I've gone with colors. So is this getting into green?
No, this is getting yellow.
Yellow. Okay. Okay.
So
that now I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Yellow and turquoise being second tier. Okay.
By the way, I think green is a fake thing. That's another thing I disagree with spiral dynamic.
Huh.
Okay, so this is where you can take your business to another level. Once again, right? If your business is still at the arcade level, don't try this, second tier thing, right? So postmodern thing, it's not appropriate. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. This is not about a one size fit all. Assess your situation, right? Whether yourself, your business, your organization, and there's always an opportunity. That is for sure. But what opportunity is require, some diagnosis.
Now, Yan, I just talked to my senior business development guy for 2 hours before we got on. And one of the things I was showing him to look for was signs of these territorial fights in the initial meetings, right? Where we get the group of company leaders into the room. And my reason for doing so is for filtering, for qualifying, right? Because and tell me if I'm wrong on this, I don't believe I can do anything with the modern level stuff if the postmodern level things are out of whack. Like if the managers or the C-level suite is infighting, how the heck can I do a process analysis? They're not going to let me work on that, is what I think.
I think you will always find a pocket where you can work on it, because that's how progress is made. Once again, if your condition is that next level of consciousness is already there in order for me to work on the lower one, you'll be waiting forever.
Yeah,
that's simply not how evolution takes place. That's and I think that's where people put cart in front of the horse. All of us are agents of change. We are creators. So we don't just benefit from something that's already been created. So yeah, it will be easier if you got the CEO, so-called philosopher kings, but that happens rarely.
Okay.
And if you wait for that in order to run your business or or enjoy your life, you'll be waiting for a long time. So this is what I'm saying. All this stuff I'm talking about, this is also already within us. Every single individual human being has the potential to do this. So they don't have to wait for higher authority. Yes, indeed, you need to be prepared to deal with what if the higher authority at the lower level of consciousness. You need to prepare to deal with it. But you should not treat that as a condition of start living. Like I said, you'll be waiting for a long time.
Okay.
And I doubt how much value you actually adding if you do that. Okay, I'm checking time, so yeah, we need to wrap up. Yeah. So, I actually will skip this, right? If you look back the slides we introduced at the step 1, right? So I forgot this step 1 or step 2. We introduced this, right? I think now you can have a better context interpretation why things are happening this way, right? Okay, so the reason a lot of people become a populist is because that's the easiest way. That's what we're born with, right? At that archaic level of consciousness. We just want my mother to feed me milk. Give me milk now. Okay, so then the reason that it became very, very challenging in the other direction is because most of our organizations still run in that traditional consciousness, right? It makes you work. It does not listen to you. Okay? So don't just complain about it. Recognize this, and you can do something about it to improve your situation. Don't wait for your CEO to change it. You can change it yourself. And that's the essence of empowerment. So what I showed you here is some basic tools that you can walk along that optimal development path. Yes, no matter how tough the environment is, you can do it. There is, if I use a language, not entirely appropriate, God has given you that gift. You just need to find it. Oh, some key takeaways, right? This is sort of a summarize of what we have gone through, all this four sessions, right? So sorry, I have no place to move this picture now.
Oh yeah, it's out of the way.
Yeah. Okay.
So for the viewers.
So the first thing I want to say is, cultural development is a fundamental human right and responsibility, right? So nobody can take away from you, and you can't opt that out yourself, because we have a life to live. Okay, and it takes place through real life experiences, right? Especially in resolving those life and death problems for you. It's called optimal conflict. And what I showed you is the tip of the iceberg. There are proven scientific methods and tools that can help you and help your team, help your organization, help your family, help your relationship. So I encourage you to give it a try, right? So we also show you 4 distinctive and successful mental models, right? In that ecology of power and love, that really explains a lot of things that's going on in contemporary cultural development, including a lot of dysfunctionality. And I have distilled this down to 2 things, right? Power and love, how they drive those mental model formation and evolution, both historically and biologically. So don't think that's just something happening in the far ancient past. It's happening now to you and to your loved ones. And finally, since we talked about in the context of operational excellence, there's tremendous opportunity for business organizations to align their job design, right, talent development with those observed patterns of power and love that will not only boost your business performance by order of magnitude, it will also make your employees happier. That's a win-win. And if you think this is too hard, what you're doing today is status quo. It's much harder. It's causing so much pain and damage to everybody, and drain so much productivity for you. You really don't have a choice. All right. So I actually have to leave myself. So I hope this is a very quick walkthrough. And like I said, if there's interest, we can have another Q&A session, right? We can sort of digest a little bit of this material and take some questions.
Yeah, please either message me on LinkedIn or message Dr. Song here. He can forward those to me as well. Or email me at jason@coldstartech.com and let us know what your questions are and if you're available to be on a live Zoom recording like this.
Well, the only question is if you're interested, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always find time for what you're interested in.
Right.
And I just find that, this is so much about life and death. And I think people should be interested.
Well, I appreciate you doing this very much. It's opened up a number of new levels for me, and I'm not getting it anywhere else. I don't see anybody else working on this kind of thing. So it's extremely valuable. Thanks again for doing this.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, this has been marvelous experience.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in working with us at Cold Start Tech, here are some of the things that we can help with. There's a lot of people who talk about process, documentation control, attention to detail, all this stuff. We help organizations become true learning organizations. Remember, if something isn't written down or recorded in some way that's accessible, searchable, findable, it didn't happen. It might as well not have happened. So if you have 2 people who solve a problem, a serious problem in your organization, but they do so in isolation and nobody finds out about it, which happens all the time, then it didn't really happen and nobody else can access that wisdom. So we unlock wisdom for your organization. We do a lot of things in the space industry. We have access to regulatory and legal officials who can help you, if you're a space industry founder, find out what areas of regulation and compliance do you need to be working with, compliant with. And we find a lot of folks don't even know about some of these areas. They don't even know that they exist. Can you imagine how you're going to stumble and stub your toe and really screw up your organization's timetable if you don't know about these things. So come and talk to us. We've got great relationships with the right people, especially in the United States and in England, and we'll be able to help you with that. And so when it comes to process improvement, whether that's some sort of business documentation, business development roles, wow, have I seen some things in business development. You got founders out there who all they're doing is quoting on projects. This is a mistake. You are wasting your energy bidding on things that most of which you never even had a chance of winning in the first place. I've seen people bankrupt themselves bidding on everything, or bidding on only these high-end things and not realizing that you need to have a strategy so that this bidding process pays for itself. I mean, you got to learn how to screen here. And this is not something that they teach you in school. I had to learn it myself, so don't feel bad about it, but come talk to us about it, okay? So either it's on the business process side or the actual manufacturing of physical goods. That kind of process improvement. You can come talk to us. Can this be done faster, cheaper, better? And yes, most of the time it sure can, because people just do stuff, and the first person to invent the way of doing things is the person who gets to choose most of the time how things are done. This happens all over the place. I like to point out our traffic signals for automobiles are based on the way that they ran railway traffic 100 years before that, okay? So, and this is key in the space industry right now, which is new, right? This is an area that I personally am interested in. How we figure out how to do stuff today is going to impact generations, because people are so easily locked into this is how we've always done it. And if you hear that at your organization, there's a warning bell. This is how we've always done it. You need to come talk to us at that point, okay? So reach out to us. It's easy to do. Just message me on LinkedIn or email me at jason@coldstartech.com. I want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.